Dr. Eleanor Vance worked for the CDC for 32 years. Virology, genetics, classified research that never made it to public journals. She retired in 2019 with commendations, a pension, and a secret that nearly destroyed her career 3 times. Last month, she contacted me through an encrypted email. No subject line, just a file attachment and 4 words. They weren't always hiding. The file contained lab results, DNA sequencing, genetic markers, and a sample collection date that made my blood run cold. August 15, 1952. Fort Detrick, Maryland, U.S. Army Medical Research Institute. 3 weeks ago, I met Dr. Vance at a cafe in Silver Spring. She's 71 now. Hands shake slightly. Parkinson's, she said, but her mind is sharp. Terrifyingly sharp. She slid a manila folder across the table. Stamped in faded red ink. Classified. Eyes only. Project Genesis. What you're about to hear, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, is why Bigfoot hides. Not because they're shy, not because they're rare, because we made them this way. And when I say we, I mean the United States government. I mean scientists like me. I mean humanity. My name is Alex Morrison, and this is the story of what we did, what we're still covering up, and why some creatures fear us more than death itself. Let's begin. Dr. Vance's story starts in 1987, when she was a junior researcher at the CDC in Atlanta. I was 29, she told me, stirring cold coffee with a plastic stick. Fresh PhD in molecular genetics. Brilliant, naive, and desperate to make a difference. When they offered me a position in a classified research division, I jumped at it. Thought I'd be working on bioweapons countermeasures, saving lives. For the first 3 years, that's exactly what it was. Standard work, anthrax, smallpox, emerging viral threats. Then in 1990, everything changed. My supervisor called me into his office, Dr. Raymond Kellerman. He'd been with the government since the 50s. Old school. He put a file on his desk. Didn't say anything. Just watched me open it. Inside were photographs, tissue samples, skeletal fragments, and a creature that shouldn't exist. The photos were dated 1952, Dr. Vance said. Black and white, poor quality, but clear enough. A humanoid subject, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair, deceased, on an autopsy table at Fort Detrick. Bigfoot. That's what I thought. That's what anyone would think. But, Doctor, Kellerman corrected me immediately. He said, not Bigfoot, Subject 0, the first one we successfully modified. Modified. That word hung in the air between us. Modified from what? I'd asked. Dr. Vance's hands trembled as she opened the folder, pulled out a document, yellowed, typewritten, dated September 3rd, 1952. Project Genesis, Phase 1 Summary. Subject, Human Augmentation via Genetic Modification. Objective, create enhanced soldiers capable of surviving extreme environments and combat scenarios. Method, introduction of non-human primate DNA sequences into human genome. Result, successful subject exhibits. Increase size, strength, environmental adaptation. Status, terminated. Subject exhibited severe psychological deterioration and aggressive behavior. I stared at the document, read it 3 times. My hands were shaking. You're telling me Bigfoot is human? Was human, Dr. Vance corrected. Subject 0 was a 24-year-old soldier, volunteer, Korean War era. They told him he'd be helping develop cold-weather survival techniques. Instead, they injected him with a genetic cocktail that rewrote his DNA over the course of 6 months. She pulled out another photo. Before and after. The before showed a young man, crew-cut, uniform, smiling. The after showed something else, still recognizably humanoid, but changed, taller, broader, face distorted, covered in dark hair, eyes that looked wrong, aware but not human anymore. What happened to him? He escaped, Dr. Vance said quietly. October 1952, broke through reinforced containment, killed 2 guards, disappeared into the Appalachian wilderness. They never recovered him. And they made more. Over the next hour, Dr. Vance laid out the impossible truth. Project Genesis ran from 1952 to 1969, 17 years, multiple research sites, Fort Detrick, Los Alamos, a secret facility in the Cascade Mountains, all under the umbrella of military human enhancement research. They'd started with volunteers, soldiers who wanted to serve, who believed they were participating in legitimate medical research, who signed consent forms they didn't understand. The early subjects were all male, Dr. Vance explained, military age, peak physical condition. They'd inject them with modified genetic sequences, combinations of gorilla, orangutan, and human DNA, and monitor the transformation. How many? 43 documented subjects between 1952 and 1963. 31 survived the initial modification. Of those, 18 escaped or were released into remote wilderness areas when the psychological effects became unmanageable. Released? You mean dumped? Essentially, the modifications worked physically. Subjects became larger, stronger, more resistant to cold and disease. But mentally, she paused. The human mind wasn't meant to exist in a body like that. They experienced severe dissociation, identity collapse. Many became violent, others withdrew completely, stopped speaking, stopped responding to human contact. So the government just let them go? What choice did they have? They couldn't contain them, couldn't control them, couldn't kill them without raising questions. So they classified everything, relocated the subjects to national forests and remote wilderness, and hoped they'd die quietly. But they didn't. No, they survived, they adapted, and some of them found each other. Dr. Vance pulled out a map, marked with red dots, dozens of them, concentrated in the Pacific Northwest, Appalachia, and the Northern Rockies. These are confirmed sightings from 1970 to 1985, not tourist reports. Military intelligence, thermal imaging, surveillance. The government tracked them, documented their movements, and they discovered something they hadn't anticipated. What? The subjects were breeding. The folder contained genetic analyses, lab reports from the 1970s and 80s, DNA samples recovered from hair, scat, and blood found in remote areas. The modified humans retained reproductive capability, Dr. Vance explained, but their offspring weren't human. The genetic modifications had become dominant, permanent. The children were born with the same characteristics. Larger, stronger, more ape-like, but with human intelligence, human emotional capacity. You're saying Bigfoot is a hybrid species? Created by accident? Not accident, our creation. We made them, then we abandoned them. And they've been trying to survive in the spaces between civilization ever since. She showed me photos from the 1980s, thermal imaging, trail camera footage, creatures that looked like the classic Bigfoot. But now I saw them differently, not as cryptids, as victims. In 1987, when I was brought into the project, my job was to track genetic drift, to see if the population was stable or dying out. What I found, she paused, steadied her shaking hands. What I found was that they were evolving, faster than should be possible, adapting to hide from us, developing behaviors specifically designed to avoid human contact, because they remember. Some of them, the original subjects, are mostly gone now, dead or too old, but they passed down knowledge, taught their children stories about the labs, the experiments, the pain. Second and third generation subjects show extreme fear responses to anything associated with humans, medical equipment, uniforms, vehicles. Dr. Vance's voice cracked. We created them, we tortured them, we abandoned them, and then we spent 70 years hunting them as monsters. In 1994, Dr. Vance continued, I was asked to analyze a new sample, recovered from the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. Forest Service had found evidence of a settlement, crude structures, tools. They'd collected biological samples. She showed me photos, not surveillance photos, crime scene photos. A makeshift shelter built from branches and moss. Inside, carved wooden objects, primitive but deliberate. And in the center, something that made my stomach turn. Children's toys, handmade. A carved figure that looked like a deer. Another that looked like a smaller version of the creatures themselves. They had families, I said quietly. They have families, present tense. I analyzed the DNA from that site, found evidence of at least 3 generations living together. Adults, adolescents, young children, a family unit. What happened to them? Dr. Vance's jaw tightened. The site was classified as a biological hazard, standard protocol. The area was cordoned off. A team was sent in to sanitize it. Sanitize. Remove all evidence. Destroy the structures. And if they encountered the subjects, she couldn't finish. Did they? The official report says no, but one of the team members contacted me years later, 2008. He was dying, cancer, wanted to confess. He told me they found the family, 2 adults, 3 young ones. The adults tried to protect the children. They didn't have weapons. Just their bodies, trying to shield the young. My hands were shaking. What did they do? What they were ordered to do. They tranquilized them, separated them, took the adults to a facility in Nevada, left the children. Left them? Alone? The children were deemed non-viable for research, and were too young, too unpredictable. The team leader made a decision. He said they couldn't bring themselves to kill them, so they sedated them and left them in the forest. Hoped they'd either die naturally or be found by others of their kind. Did anyone follow up? No. The site was burned. Sterilized, erased. Those children, we don't know what happened to them. Dr. Vance pulled out another document, more recent, dated 2011. This is a behavioral analysis I conducted on genetic samples from the Olympic Peninsula. I found something interesting. The DNA showed markers for extreme stress, generational trauma, epigenetic changes that suggest the population has adapted, biologically adapted, to constant fear and avoidance behavior. What does that mean? It means we traumatize them so badly that their biology changed. Their children are born with heightened fear responses, with instincts to hide, to never trust humans. We didn't just create them, we broke them. At a genetic level. Over the next 3 decades of her career, Dr. Vance had tracked the population, documented their decline, watched as government policy shifted from study and contain to deny and suppress. By the 2000s, the official position was that Bigfoot doesn't exist. All evidence is either hoaxed or misidentified animals. The few scientists who tried to investigate were discredited. Funding disappeared. Careers were destroyed. But you had proof. You had the DNA, the history, proof that the government would never acknowledge, proof that would expose decades of illegal human experimentation, proof that would cost billions in lawsuits and reparations. You think they'd let that surface? She showed me termination letters, scientists who'd asked too many questions, researchers who'd found tissue samples and tried to analyze them, all fired, all discredited, some threatened. In 2015, a geneticist at UC Berkeley recovered bone fragments from a cave in Northern California. She ran a DNA analysis, found the same markers I'd been tracking, human and non-human primate. She tried to publish. Her lab was shut down, funding revoked. The university said her methods were unsound. She was forced to retract. Where is she now? Dead. Car accident, 2017. The way Dr. Vance said it made the implication clear. Maybe an accident, maybe not. They're still covering it up, I said. They'll cover it up forever. Because the truth is too damaging. We created a new species through illegal experimentation on human subjects. Then we abandoned them to die in the wilderness. And when they survived, we spent 70 years hunting them, denying their existence, ensuring they could never advocate for themselves or seek justice. How many are left? Dr. Vance's hands trembled as she pulled out her final document, a population estimate, dated 2018, her last year before retirement. Best estimate, maybe 400, scattered across the Pacific Northwest Appalachia and the Northern Rockies. Small family groups, isolated individuals, 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th generation by now. Most have never seen a human up close. Their parents taught them to hide, to avoid, to fear. 400. That's all? That's all. We created them, we traumatized them, and now they're going extinct. Within 50 years, maybe less, they'll be gone, and the only evidence they ever existed will be classified documents and genetic samples locked in government storage. Why are you telling me this? I asked Dr. Vance. Why now, after all these years? She looked at me with tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much, carried too much guilt. Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I have maybe 4 months, and I can't die carrying this secret. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to tell this story. The government will deny everything. Of course they will. They'll say I'm senile, that I'm making it up for attention, that the documents are forgeries, but you'll have the evidence, the DNA analyses, the photos, the paper trail. Maybe someone will listen. Maybe someone will care. She slid the entire folder across the table. Decades of research, proof of the impossible. What about the subjects? I asked. The ones still alive. Do they know? Do they understand what was done to them? Some might. The older ones. Second generation. They'd have been told stories by their parents about the labs, the pain, the abandonment. But most, they just know they're different. They just know humans are dangerous. They don't know why. Don't know they were created. They just survive, hide, try to live. Have you ever met one? Dr. Vance was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Once, 2003, Olympic National Forest. I was collecting samples, environmental DNA. I heard movement behind me, turned around, and there he was, maybe 20 feet away. Young male, probably second generation. What happened? We looked at each other. For maybe 30 seconds, I could see intelligence in his eyes, awareness, fear, yes, but also curiosity, like he was trying to understand why I was there, what I wanted. Did you try to communicate? I held up my hands, palms out, universal gesture of peace, and I said very quietly, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for what we did. Did he understand? I don't know. He tilted his head, watched me. Then he turned and walked away. Didn't run, didn't threaten, just left, like he'd decided I wasn't worth the risk. Dr. Vance's eyes were wet. That moment haunts me, because I was apologizing for something he probably didn't even fully understand. He just knew humans were dangerous, knew to stay away, but he didn't know why. Didn't know his grandfather was a human soldier who volunteered for an experiment. Didn't know his entire species exists because of our cruelty. 2 weeks after our meeting, Dr. Vance sent me one final email. A video file. Date stamped 3 days earlier. I almost didn't open it, but I did. The video showed a hospital room, Dr. Vance in a bed, thin, frail, barely recognizable. But her voice was clear. Alex, if you're watching this, I'm gone. I wanted to leave you with one more thing. Something I never put in the official files. Something I kept to myself. She held up a photo. Recent, digital, showed a forest clearing. And in the clearing, something that made my heart stop. A group, maybe 8 or 9 of them, adults, children, sitting together, around what looked like a small fire. I took this in 2017. Dr. Vance's recorded voice said, deep in the Cascades. I'd been tracking a family group. Wanted to document their behavior? I set up a trail camera, remote, infrared. The photo was grainy, dark, but clear enough. The figures were massive, obviously non-human. But their behavior, they were telling stories, Dr. Vance said. I watched the footage, hours of it. The adults would make gestures, vocalizations, and the young ones would watch, learn. They were passing down knowledge, history, just like we do. I don't know what they were saying, but I like to think they were telling the children to be careful, to hide, to survive. Because that's all they can do, all we left them with. Dr. Vance's image on screen looked directly at the camera, at me. If you share this story, people will call you crazy. They'll say you're making it up. That's fine. I don't care about being believed anymore. I care about the truth being told. Because somewhere in those mountains, right now, there's a child, half human, created by human cruelty, who's being taught to fear us, to hide from us, who will grow up not knowing why they exist, not knowing they were made, just knowing they're alone. And that's our legacy. That's what we did. We created life, we traumatized it, and then we erased it. And we'll keep denying it until they're all gone, and there's no evidence we ever committed this crime. The video ended. Dr. Eleanor Vance died 6 days later, April 15, 2024. The obituary in the Washington Post mentioned her distinguished career at the CDC, her contributions to virology, her loving family. It didn't mention Project Genesis. It didn't mention what she'd spent 30 years tracking. It didn't mention the species we created and abandoned. I'm sharing this story knowing most of you won't believe it, knowing I can't provide the classified documents without facing legal consequences, knowing the government will deny everything. But Dr. Vance was right. The truth needs to be told, even if it's dismissed, even if it's buried, even if I'm called a fraud. Because somewhere in the deep wilderness right now, there's a creature, half human, modified by science, abandoned by its creators, trying to survive in a world that doesn't acknowledge it exists. And it's afraid, not because it's an animal, because it carries genetic memory of what we did, because its grandparents were human soldiers who volunteered to serve their country and were transformed into something else, something we decided wasn't worth saving. We didn't discover Bigfoot. We created it. And then we spent 70 years making sure no one would ever know. Dr. Vance's final words to me, in person, were these: "We like to think we're the good guys, the civilized ones, the moral ones. But we did this. We created a new species through torture. We abandoned them. We hunted them. And we'll take this secret to our graves, because admitting it would mean admitting we're capable of unthinkable cruelty." She was right. If this story made you question what we're capable of as a species, not Bigfoot, but us, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And ask yourself, if we did this once, what else have we done and covered up? If you want more true Bigfoot stories that challenge everything you think you know, subscribe to Silent Bigfoot Stories and turn on the notification bell. We upload new encounters every week. And remember, the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in the forest. They're the ones wearing lab coats, carrying clipboards, following orders. Until next time.